Hi guys, this is Tammy Dunnett with Conquer Conflict, and today we're talking about signs of a toxic workplace behavior number 14 out of 15, and I'm sure the list could go on, but I'm stopping at 15. And in particular today we're talking about what happens when you just can't talk to your boss. And I'm going to add a question here. Have you been able to find a way to talk to your boss? I want to know some good stories today. Maybe you have been able to create that environment, and we're going to talk about some of those skills and strategies today. So as always, if you have not joined me in the Conquer Conflict Facebook group, go ahead and join me there because there will be a download on this topic as there has been on every one of the signs of a toxic workplace. And it gives you a little bit more information than what I can cover here. And as you're coming in here, be sure to let me know in the comments that you're with me, where you're tagging in from. Let me know if you're watching the live or the replay. And if you have any questions, I'm going to answer those as well. So what happens when I have a boss I cannot talk to? Well, the first thing we need to do is really identify if this is truly a boss, like a bully boss, or if this is just maybe a boss who doesn't have time for me, or maybe a boss with a different style than me. So there are a few questions we need to ask ourselves before we can say or define our boss as unapproachable. And the first one is their personality different than mine? So me personally, I like to tackle things head on. I think I'm pretty direct. I can be passive aggressive at times. I know that about myself, mostly in my personal relationships, less so in my professional, but I'm sure it blends in there. So I am comfortable just coming up to you and saying, hey, there's this issue. We need to talk about it. Let's find some solutions and move forward. However, maybe my boss isn't so much like that. Maybe my boss is a little bit more taken aback by my assertiveness. I've certainly been called aggressive before in the past for being comfortable having those conversations. And I can totally understand it, because if you are more of an avoider and an indirect accommodator kind of person with conflict, it would feel really aggressive if I just came to you and said, hey, we've got a problem. That would make you want to like, ugh. So the different styles might be what's at play in terms of you not feeling comfortable talking and approaching to your boss about a problem. The other thing is introvert, extrovert. There's a little bit of conversation around that as well. An introvert is less comfortable having multiple and lengthy conversations than an extrovert. And so for me, again, as an extrovert, if I have a boss who's very introverted and not willing to sit down and have a hard conversation with me because that just drains them, I might interpret that as being unapproachable. So we do need to ask ourselves a few fundamental questions around our relationships as terms of personalities and how we deal with conflict to identify if that is the root cause. Because if that's the root cause, we have some solution, right? We can modify our approach to that conversation. I can learn some new strategies to talk to them or not talk to them, define some time. So the second thing is they just might be too busy, or we have a perception they're too busy to deal with us. Now, in larger organizations, it's a little bit more obvious because they tend to be always running from meeting to meeting to meeting, and they just don't seem to ever have time for you. In smaller organizations where that contact with the boss is probably more likely and you're probably working alongside each other, they maybe focus on bigger overview kind of projects as opposed to what you're needing at the front line, and it will feel like they maybe are not available to you. So we do need to ask ourselves if that is part of what's driving my perception that my boss is unapproachable and I cannot talk to them. Because again, if that's the case, that they are just going from meeting to meeting, you can take action. Why not schedule a standing meeting in their calendar, whether this is once a week, once a month, bi-weekly? Go ahead and schedule like 6 of them in there, and then you have your dedicated time with them. One, they're going to appreciate that you took that time and the initiative. Two, they're going to think that your professionalism to make sure that they're updated and informed and asking for their advice and insights is spot on. But now what if you actually just have somebody that you just can't talk to? Our differences are so bad that we're just never going to find our way back. We have a couple options, right? You can always leave. However, the economy is not always favorable for that, so we need to have some other strategies. In the Conquer Conflict Masterclass, I really talk a lot about how we set the stage to have a conversation, and that conversation needs to be crafted and scripted to the sense that what we're sharing and what we're saying is safe, for everybody in the conversation. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to take it that way, but we've done some work ahead of time. So that's kind of what I'm going to suggest here. I'm going to give you two different scenarios, and on the download there's an actual script of what you can say, and you can modify it to bring your concern forward if this is your situation. So the first one is, what happens if you're getting consistent negative and unfair feedback from your supervisor or your boss? That is a lot to take on if it's just always negative. Your morale starts to decrease, your self-esteem starts to decrease, your self-worth, your self-value, that all starts to plummet into the ground. And if you've ever been in a situation like that, you know that the struggle is real, because the feelings you're having do not match with who you are and what you can produce. So there's a disconnect in yourself, there's a disconnect between how they see you and how you see yourself. So if you are dealing with a boss like this, you definitely want to have a conversation. I mean, if you want to keep this job, you're going to have a conversation in order to feel safe and productive. Because if you feel like you're not appreciated, guess what? You're not going to produce. And then they're probably going to fire your ass anyways. So let's do a little preemptive work here. The first thing is, you never want to go in unprepared. Now, some people call this gathering your evidence. That sounds a bit harsh, like you're going to court. Really, what I want you to do is to consider, what is the message they're telling me when they're giving me this feedback, outside of the emotion. That can be challenging sometimes because it's the emotion that causes the sting. But if they're telling me things that are very broad and undefined, like you're lazy, I want to then ask for specifics. So I need the evidence, I need the rationale for that feedback. But if they're telling me you're never to work on time and we start at 8 and you're always here at 8:30, and I'm taking offense to that because maybe I've got my own personal situation and maybe it's just a struggle for me to get here at 8 and you've had this conversation before. I don't know what the context is. However, that's some very specific feedback that you can reflect on and take that into the conversation, right? Yeah, you're right. I'm always here at 8:30, consistently at 8:30, and I stay an extra half an hour. And I thought we talked about this before and things were kind of worked out. But from the feedback I got the last week from you, I'm sensing this might be an issue and maybe we need to revisit this. Bada boom, bada bang, right? What you always want to start with is the end in mind. What is my goal? Relationship, keeping that working relationship being cordial, therapeutic in the healthcare world is what we say, is probably one of them. Keeping your job is probably another one. But let's stick with the relationship, because keeping your job is an end outcome of being able to keep the relationship. So what is your end goal? We want to acknowledge that they're giving us feedback, even if it hurts, even if it sucks the way they deliver it. Gosh, I can't tell you how many times I've said to people, thank you for bringing that to my attention. I appreciate that you feel safe to share that with me. Because what I'm really saying is, you know what, sometimes you're an ass. I don't like how you're talking to me. However, I can't come out and say that. So in order to keep a safe relationship, and I truly am thankful that people will share things with me. I don't always want to hear it though. That's been my kind of standard go-to when I'm feeling defensive right away, is I need to come back down to I call it my island of values. I've done another video on this before. I like to come from the values of caring, connection, and curiosity. That's where I do my best work. And if you come to me heated and tell me that I suck for whatever reason, I am like quickly transported off of that, and I'm over here in defense and judgment. So in order for me to move myself back over here, that has been my strategy, is just to say, thank you for feeling safe enough to bring that towards me. It grounds me back into my caring, connection, and curiosity. So you'll need to find something that works for you, that will help you come back to where you want to be working out of. So acknowledging their feedback, the time that they took, the message that they sent, whatever, just let them know that you appreciate that. And then we want to let them know what we've done with it. I've considered it, I've maybe made some changes, or have some more questions, or I'd like to have a conversation about this so I can understand it better. What is it you're going to do with that information? With that, you sometimes may need to get some clarification, and you're going to ask them what their data is, what they heard, what they saw, how they came to that conclusion. And then you may want to share your own understanding of the events, because here's what happens. We all look at things differently. And your boss's perspective is different than your perspective. There is no doubt about that. The boss's objectives, you may have the same goal in mind, but the way you get them done, completely different. And so sometimes it's more about sharing how you saw things, what you understood your role to be, the resources you used, and acknowledge that maybe there were some gaps or blind spots that would have helped you achieve a different outcome. And then collectively look at options to move forward. So there is a script in this download that you can get on the Facebook group that kind of highlights all of those pieces together. Now I want to talk about a second situation where you may feel like you just can't talk to your boss. And that is when the boss is the problem. I mean, let's face it, that is sometimes the problem. And often what comes to mind here is micromanagement. You're trying to do your work and you've got this person over your shoulder all the time, critiquing you, changing how you do it, imposing new deadlines, throwing in new information, asking you to update them. But they're always popping in, or they're not letting you actually focus on the work that you need to do. And so micromanagement can feel like the boss is the problem. I'm going to ask you to do something hard here, because the first thing you want to do is quit. Right? Let's face it. Nobody likes to be told how to do their job, when to do their job, how high to jump, when to sit, all those kind of things. But if you love the job, I want to propose another alternative, and that is really to understand where your boss is coming from before you jump ship, and that might actually put you back on side and staying on the ship. So giving the gift of best intention is a second strategy that I've used a lot. Knowing that when people are coming from a good place, it may be that their delivery isn't effective for you, but recognizing that they have a good intention often will just, again, put me back on care, curiosity, connection, my island of values that I like to work from. And then we can connect on a common goal. And so when you do that, the feelings of being underappreciated, undervalued, they're still there, but they're a little bit less intense because you're recognizing in them what you would want them to recognize in you, that you are doing the best in the circumstances that you have. And if this person is always micromanaging you, standing over your shoulder, like a little dinosaur, that is impeding you from giving your best. And so the conversation looks a little different. You need to actually highlight the behaviors that you're seeing that are causing some issues. And I have a script for that as well. Again, always focusing on the end goal, appreciating what they're doing, and then exploring to see what are some of the root causes and solutions that you guys can come up with together. So it's not always easy. I mean, there are days where you just feel like, nope, I can't talk to this boss. There's no way, it's not going to happen. I'm just going to start looking for another job. A few days later, it comes and you're like, okay, maybe I'm not going to leave because it wasn't so bad. That emotional reaction needs to be tempered with the facts of the case. And then hopefully you'll be able to find some resolution to move forward, or resolution to leave and know that you've done everything you can to stay in a workplace that you loved. Okay, I see no questions, and that's okay. If you're watching the replay, you can still put your questions in there and I will respond to you. Again, on the Conquer Conflict group, if you join that group, you'll see that there's a download called Signs of a Toxic Workplace number 14, and that's what we're talking about today. Until next time, make it a great day.